So, continuing our discussion on diabetes and its types, it's as already mentioned, the type 2 diabetes is more prevalent in the population, specifically the adult population. Type 2 diabetes is a diabetic type in which you are producing insulin, but somehow your tissues, your cells are not responding to insulin. It's not resistant. And as a result of this, they are resistant to insulin. And as a result of this, insulin is not being able to perform its function. And what is its function? Its function is to make or to keep the level of glucose into a to control the level of glucose in your blood. So if insulin is not performing its function, the level of glucose in the blood will be increased, and glucose will not be available for the function it does, that is for the energy production. So as a result, type 2 diabetes is not a really disorder of the production of the insulin, but it is that somehow, due to whatever reason, your cells, your living system, your physiological system is not responding to insulin. So this is in quite contrast to the type 1 insulin, type 1 diabetes. What happens in the type 1 diabetes is that your cells are not producing the insulin. Your cells are, either because of autoimmune attack or whatever reason, the insulin is not being produced. And because there is not enough insulin, then of course the glucose is not available for the production of the energy in type 1 diabetes. But type 2 diabetes is, in that sense, it's not only different, it's more than challenging also, because somehow insulin is being produced, but it's not being taken up by or being used by the cells, which means that it will be more challenging to deal with this disease. So this insulin resistance is a decreased ability of the tissues to respond to the insulin, and there is an increase in the glucose level and decrease in the uptake of the glucose, because insulin is the major function of the insulin is the uptaking of the glucose, but insulin is not performing its function, so there will be more and more accumulation of glucose into your body. And it can also increase in the lipolysis. Of course, as already mentioned, that if there is not enough glucose available for performing its function, your body system start depending upon your fatty acids, and the fatty acid, of course, come from the process of lipolysis. Common causes, still we don't have direct molecular based evidence, but still we have some correlations. One of the major correlations is between the obesity and the type 2 diabetes. But keep in mind that it doesn't mean that all the obese people have the type 2 diabetes, but majority of the diabetic people are obese, and majority of the or most of the obese people have diabetes, or they develop diabetes in the long run. Then this is one thing, that your cells are not, or your body systems are not responding to the insulin. They are resistant to insulin. What will happen then? Then eventually there will be more and more accumulation of the glucose, and that more accumulated glucose will signal the production of more and more insulin will be produced. And as a result of this, the insulin producing cells, that is the beta cells, pancreatic beta cells, they will be under very severe strain. That will ultimately lead to the decay of those cells also, and that deterioration of the system which is producing insulin, that will also be compromised because of this thing. Initially, of course, you are getting insulin, but because insulin is not performing its function, and as a result the glucose is being increased, सो देन क्या होगा, फिर आपके जिस्म के ऊपर, उन सेल्स के ऊपर जो कि इंसुलिन प्रोड्यूस करते हैं, उन्होंने कहना ज़्यादा पैदा करो, ज़्यादा पैदा करो, प्रोड्यूस मोर इंसुलिन, प्रोड्यूस मोर इंसुलिन, और वो वाले सेल फिर अंदर स्ट्रेन आ जाती हैं. देयर विल बी अंडर वेरी सीवियर स्ट्रेन which will deteriorate the whole system. And that's why diabetes is such a dangerous disease that it also start killing your cells, the cells which are producing the insulin. Here you can also think about obesity, because we know that in the obese people there is more and more accumulation of fats in the adipose tissues, and more accumulated fats in the adipose tissue can also cause inflammation, and that inflammation can also cause the deterioration of the beta cells. So in that way, obesity also contributes towards the worsening the situation which is caused by the diabetes type 2. Hyperglycemia, of course, one of the major inevitable outcome of the diabetes is that you have more and more glucose in your sugar. That is, of course, one of the major indication of that you are diabetic now. What happened that glucose is there, but it's not being utilized. Your body is under strain because there is glucose in the blood. All the signalings are because glucose, presence of glucose, or presence of any material, any compound in excess amount will have its impact. But because glucose is such an important metabolite, such an important component of the metabolism, it will also leads to the initiation or eliciting of all sort of signaling, and which will disturb the whole physiological process which are taking place in your body. That's why we say the diabetes is a disease of the diseases. Also, it leads to ketonemia also, because of course you don't have the glucose to be used. Glucose is there, but you can't use it, you can't take it. What will happen? The body of course need energy. वो क्या होगा, वो फैट्स को लेना शुरू कर देगी, लिपोलाइसिस होगी, फैट्स विल बी स्टार्टिंग, your triglycerides will be starting degrading, and you will be having more and more fats in your blood, more and more ketone bodies being produced, and you gets affected by ketonemia, acidosis, and so on and so forth. So this is what we are just in dyslipidemia, that is the abnormality in the metabolism of lipids, because now you have a stress strain on your body system which is using lipids for getting the energy. You will have then really abnormal levels of HDLs, LDLs, chylomicrons, and so on and so forth, which will eventually lead to really big problems like cardiovascular diseases. So, of course, you always, there is an option to use the drugs, but in addition to use the drugs, especially, keep in mind that if you are dealing with something which is polygenic in nature, which is multifactorial, drugs only can't do much. So you have to change your lifestyle. One is, of course, we have seen here that there is a relationship between obesity and diabetes. So you can reduce your weight, you can change your lifestyle, you can be more you have to be more active, you have to do more exercises, you have to eat less oily or fatty foods, and so on and so forth. So anything which leads to the reduction of your weight through these healthy activities will really help in dealing with your diabetes. Then there is also bariatric surgery, in which your digestive system is somehow modified in a way that your weight is reduced. It can be cutting off some part of your digestive system, or creating a bypass for the passage of food, but in any way somehow your weight is reduced. So for short term it can be useful, but we have seen that remission cases occur. The disease occurs again, and it's occurs again with some more severity. So it's not a promise that the bariatric surgery will really lead to the treatment of this disease. So at the end, it's not always, especially for diseases like these, which are multifactorial, it's not only drugs which can really help you. You also have to change your lifestyle.